Welcome to another episode of the Rediscovery channel. And this week, myself, Stilber, my buddy Ivor, we have a special guest on as well, the Great Pharaoh, which I think will be really helpful regarding the topic I'm going to be speaking about today. And I want to ask you guys, what do you think is the most bloody war going on right now at this moment?
Ukraine and Russia.
Wrong. Yeah.
I was going to say something
in
Africa. Something in Africa, right? Like Nigeria, maybe?
Well, actually, maybe Nigeria as well. But the bloodiest war that I think is going on right now is the war on Tigray. Have you heard of it at all?
No, in Tigray, no.
Okay, so I just looked up the amount of estimated deaths. So it's in the northern part of Ethiopia, and the amount of deaths in the Ukraine war is somewhere around 20,000, I believe, and the amount of deaths in the war on Tigray is around 600,000. So it's a massive war, and a lot of people are dying, literally starving to death because of embargoes and really just atrocities where people are executed at point blank and entire villages are destroyed. Yeah. But to go into the story, I really wanted to learn a little bit more about Ethiopia. And we also had a request about, okay, can you tell a little bit more about the history of the Church of Ethiopia, which I hope that Great Pharaoh, you'll be able to support me with a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to start off at the beginning, and that is where Ethiopia and the region of Tigray, where this war was or is taking place. I think there's another ceasefire at the moment that just came in this weekend. So let's see if it lasts. But this Tigray region. This is the part where an ancient kingdom, the kingdom of Aksum, was started, or the Aksumite Empire, which is also mentioned in the Bible. This is a kingdom that at the time, this was.
Sorry to interrupt, Neil.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to make a point that there are more than 2 million people that have been pushed out of their homes, and they're now stuck in a famine. There are people that are starving now.
Yeah, at this moment, in the Tigray region. Yeah, it's a region of about 5.5 million people, and and you don't hear about it at all in the news because I don't know, nobody cares.
I can't believe that this big huge war has not been shown on the news. I watch the news constantly. It says a lot about what our media strategies are and what they're doing. If we cannot even inform people of the biggest wars, that goes to show you the kind of media that they're putting out these days.
Yeah.
Propaganda machine, basically.
Yeah, and it's really sad because so these Tigrayan people, they are the descendant of these ancient empire, right? This is the former seat of power of the Aksum kingdom that lasted for centuries. So basically, they became a Christian country are Christians around the 3rd century through 2 Phoenician slaves that ended up converting the king Elazam. I think I have that right. And they've been a seat of Christianity throughout all the centuries. And they've had communications with Rome, with Egypt, and they've also kept out foreigners and invasions for centuries. And basically, it's the only African country that was able to remain Christian, and they were ruled by Muslims, I think, for 14 years or something like that, which is a surprisingly low amount considering the amount of attacks they were under. Yeah, so their empire or kingdom used to encompass places like South Arabia, Yemen, parts of Sudan, Eritrea, Djibouti, and many other places. And during the reign of King Caleb, which was their most strongest point in power, I think that was around the 6th centuries. Yeah, so there's a rich history there. And if you go to the region of Tigray, there's all these churches that are, I'm not saying, I think it's Hewn, hewn out of solid rock. So they have all these really old Christian churches and monasteries. And they're also very colorful, some of them, but they're beautiful places and with a rich history. And it's also a country that's or a location. So the Tigrayan people, part of the larger Ethiopian country nowadays, they are extremely Orthodox still in their religion, in their Christianity. And they have a very strong traditions around fasting. So they have fasting around Timkat, which is the Epiphany of Christ, Meskel, the finding of the true cross, Ledet, Christmas, and then Fasiga, which is Easter. Much of Tigrayan traditional dresses have crosses meticulously stitched into them with an array of colors. And anyway, so let me try to get a little bit back. So maybe let's go talk a little bit about the origin of the Ethiopian church. And Great Pharaoh, help me here if I'm going off bounds. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
So there's something called the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church,
right?
Which means unity. And they are part of the Oriental Orthodox churches, which I think is the Egyptian church is part of as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. They are part of the Oriental part, as opposed to the Eastern, which is comprised mostly of the Russian, the Greeks, the Romanians. The Orientals are the Ethiopians, the Coptics, which also means Egyptians, the Indians, the Eritreans, and the Syrians.
Yeah.
So these are the Oriental section. Yes.
I got a question. So do they have reciprocity with the communion? So would Great Pharaoh be able to take communion at an Ethiopian Orthodox church and vice versa?
Yeah. Yes. I would be able to take communion there because we share the same very specific beliefs, and that comes down to the nature of Christ. We do believe that we've pretty much worked out all the issues, but we're just simply being separated by, some politics, some cultural differences. But yeah, that's for another topic, another day.
Different liturgies too, I'm sure, right? Different language.
Yeah, the liturgies are slightly different. Well, besides the language, just different, slightly different in terms of what their creeds say, maybe a little bit differently, but for the most part the same. Just different languages, different culture, though. But the Christian beliefs is pretty parallel.
Yeah, they also split off during the Council of Chalcedon, I think, in Chalcedon in 451, and that's about the nature of Christ, I believe. But so then the Egypt Coptic Church is part of the same Oriental Church, which has about 60 million followers in the world today.
Yeah, and by the way, the Ethiopian is the second largest populated country in Africa. They are the largest Oriental Orthodox church, which has between 36 and 49.8 million in Ethiopia. I mean, this is absolutely huge. This is huge. I mean, magnanimous, I mean, 39, 40 million people. My goodness, So definitely a lot of people involved in this. And like I said, there have been many, many thousands have been wounded. Thousands have been wounded or killed, and there are almost 2 million people that have been driven out of their homes. This is unbelievable, unreal.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
see some of the pictures, you'll see the people with the bulging bellies, which is like the latest stage of not having eaten anything for so long, and it's
Yes.
because they put on an embargo on this region. So there is this. There's a long history in Ethiopia. And Ethiopia has been a strong empire for hundreds of years, and for the longest time, the power was in this Tigray region. Um, but later on, the country of Ethiopia around the 70s, they disposed of their emperor, and that was Ethiopia was one of 3 countries in the world that still had an emperor, including Japan and Persia at the time, and that was Selassie, who actually plays a big role in the Safari religion, which actually I know almost nothing about. But he was
Rastafarian.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't
So
think he started that. I think that's like a Afro-Caribbean thing where they wanted to connect themselves with Ethiopia because Ethiopia was such a great power historically.
yes, yeah,
Well,
Also
he
part
took
of
care
like
of the country. Haile Selassie was one of the greatest leaders in Ethiopian history, and he even claimed to be from the descendant of the seed of David, his lineage. He actually was a great leader all around the world. The cops recognize him as a great leader, and he ran a great kingdom at the time. You know,
yeah. Well, unfortunately, there was a socialist revolution because there was another famine in the 70s that was also due to drought, but also just due to mismanagement, and it was a feudal society still at the time. So there was a socialist revolution, a Marxist revolution, and Egypt, but also Eritrea became officially part of the Soviet bloc, and they got a lot of weapons from North Korea, China, Russia, and became one of the most heavily militarized countries in Africa. And they've always had a strong military because they've kicked out the Ottomans, they've kicked out the Italians, up until Mussolini. But they've always been very successful on the battlefield, and just a strong nation. But in the aftermath of this socialist stage, which, by the way, abolished religion and had a lot of religious persecution, like they made atheism the official state religion at the time in Ethiopia, and which is no longer the case, but I believe it's still the case in Eritrea, where there's still a lot of religious persecution. And similar to Ethiopia, I think in Ethiopia it's around 65% is Christians, and then the rest mostly Muslim. And I think in Eritrea it's like 60 or maybe 55% Christian, and the rest Muslim. But there was a long battle around the northern border between Eritrea and Ethiopia. And when the new prime minister, or the current president of Ethiopia, came to power, he got the Nobel Peace Prize for reuniting Eritrea and Ethiopia, and really settling some of those old scores. But the people in the region, in the Tigray region, felt that they were slighted and that they lost a lot of their land. So there were rebellions I think in 2019, 2020, they started, and they were doing really well, and they were going all the way up to the capital of the country, until Ethiopia started using drones, which they bought, I think, mostly from Turkey and Israel, and fought them back, and really ended up destroying also a lot of old churches and old monasteries and mosques, because they really want to wipe the Tigrayan people off the map. And that's also something that Abiy Ahmed, which was the Nobel Peace Prize winner, has said in the past. Which, by the way, is the son of a Muslim, but he's an evangelical Christian, and his wife is very evangelical. So I'm not sure what the story there is, to be honest. But it's a gruesome war, and because the sitting president is aligned to Western interests, you don't hear about it because, of course, he's getting American funding or Western funding, and he's seen as the good guy because he's friendly towards the West. So yeah, that's actually some of the things I wanted to talk about. Although now it's been a little bit through each other, but the history of the Ethiopian church is really rich, and they even have claimed that one of its churches, Our Lady Mary of Zion, is host to the original Ark of the Covenant that Moses carried with the Israelite during the Exodus. So that's an interesting one. And throughout Ethiopia, Orthodox churches are not considered churches until the local bishop gives them a tablet, which is a replica of the tablets in the original Ark of the Covenant. So, which is interesting. And then they don't eat pork, which is an interesting, because they in their Christianity, they lean more on the Old Testament versus the New Testament. So it plays a stronger part in their religion. So, and actually, yes, Haile Selassie, so Rastafari, he was himself a member of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and he actually refuted the heretical claims of the Rastafarian new religious movement. So just something to know. So that,
yeah, I was right about that. They didn't
Mhm.
have anything to do. Like, he didn't mean for those people to exist. They just kind of did their own thing in his name.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to also mention: have you ever heard of the Garima Gospels?
Oh man,
I can't say that I've heard that one. The
So
Garima.
they're actually two ancient Ethiopic gospel books written in the Semitic Ethiopian language that they speak also in Tigray, which is Gies or Tigrayan. It's next. I think they're related, which is basically a very old language that doesn't have any vowels. Well, they added up vowels later on, and it's also written from right to left. But it's one of the oldest, or maybe the oldest, illuminated gospels. So where they use the lights to, and I'll include some pictures because they're really quite nice. So yeah, it's a very rich history, and now there's a piece. So let's see if it hopes. But I was hoping to use this channel also to get some more, on the one hand, acknowledgement for the rich history of the Ethiopian church, and but also to let shed some light on the atrocities happening to the people in Tigray right now.
Niels, if you don't mind me interrupting, I wanted to make it clear, sort of set the map for our audience, because this part might get confusing. The TPLF, this was a group that led the forces against the Marxist military dictatorship in the 70s. So they were the good guys. They sort of liberated Ethiopia. Now they're becoming the bad guys. They're becoming corrupt, taking the power, abusing power. There's a lot of human rights violations, and so now the Mr. Abiy, I guess he's a lot of Ethiopia. The main region of Ethiopia are now fighting against the Tigray Valley. That's where the corruption is. But I just want to make it clear to our audience that the TPLF was originally what set the country free in the 70s. It just now become a black market. It's just become a place of corruption now. You know?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and the original junta that was ruling over Ethiopia and Eritrea was called the Derg, which was interesting. group of people, and which was basically a socialist group. But yes, now they've and the Tigray, they are part of a nationalist movement, whereas the current president, Abiy, he is part of the Oromo group, and that's a whole nother group of people that when the Ethiopians or the Tigray were fighting off, but there are also, it's not just the Tigray, there are other ethnicities, but they were fighting off the Ottomans, and they were fighting off the Italians and others. They were slowly moving up north because the eastern part was under siege by the Muslims, and yeah, so they had a really rough time because they were cut off from the rest of the Christian world for the longest time. Even though they tried to also keep up communications with the Egyptian church after Egypt fell to the Muslims, which they did for a long time, but after a while, I think the Sultan, whoever it was at the time, put an end to it. So yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's so much to say. I'll include some cool pictures of the churches, and of the Garima Gospels. So, but yeah, if you want to learn a little bit more about the Tigray and the war that's happening there right now, and these people, which by the way are really beautiful people in general, the way they look, they're like really tall and interesting looking people, with such a rich history. How the atrocities that are happening there right now, it's
And
just
let me,
unbelievable. Yeah.
sorry, Neil, to interrupt you again. I mean, this is so unfortunate. Ethiopia has been known to be a landmark for rich Christian history. The resources of the country, it's a beautiful country. You know, this is a country that is under attack. This is a country that was just amazing for the last 40, 50 years. You know, I just want to make that clear to our audience that Ethiopia does not have a history of violence. This was a very accelerative, a very exponential development. You know, I just want the audience to know that there was like an evil inside that just kind of came out of nowhere. You know, and I just want to make that point that Ethiopia does not have a history of violence. It's not like Somalia or having tension or things like that. This is a very beautiful nation, beautiful people, beautiful history.
Yeah, thanks for that. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, sure. Yeah.
So yeah, and any other questions or from maybe that's
Well,
you? Yeah.
well, I made that point about that. I do want to confirm. So Mr. Albi, he is on the side of the Ethiopians in the southern regions. From what I'm understanding, the Abiy guy, he's the
Yeah.
one who's sort of countering the TPLF, right?
He is. He's now part. Is he part of the TPLF? No. He's fighting them. I think the TPLF
He's
is
fighting.
now. Yeah, fighting. I think the Tigray are fighting in the TPLF, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken. Yeah. Which is like a nationalistic. I think it's left-leaning nationalistic movement, which is interesting because I wonder how that works. Like there are so many divisions there, and the Eritreans are now. They were fighting together with the Ethiopian government against the Tigray because they were still, they still had grievances as well. And the Eritrean military, like it's extremely anti-religious. So they were invading this Tigray region where the people are very religious, and the people in the military, they're like torturing people, executing them, and raping. There's a lot of rape going on.
Tigray, let's make it clear to the audience, these are good people. These are peaceful people. They're being under attack from the TPLQ, whatever, TPLF, whatever. But the Tigrayans are the good people. They're the ones who are being driven out of their homes by these militias, by these, this ethnic cleansing campaign that's going on.
Yeah. It's really sad what's happening. So and nobody, you don't hear about it, which again shows you that everybody's putting up flags of the Ukraine in their profiles and everything, which is fine, but in another part of the world, there's hundreds of thousands of people are getting killed and raped and everything, and nobody seems to care about it because in this case, the president is pro-Western, so yeah.
Yeah, if
So
something doesn't suit their purposes or it's not useful or it doesn't fulfill the narrative, then they'll just bury the story.
Well, it shows you how polarized the media is, what we hear in America, what the world is aware of, the information no one aware of. He asked me, what do you think is the most bloodiest country? I immediately said Ukraine and Russia. Like, there should be no question about it. That is incorrect. We have a bloodbath going on in Ethiopia, and nobody is knowing about this. This is amazing that we're bringing this up, because it just goes to show you can't always trust the news. You literally have to go to these non-political type news stations and etc.
Yeah, you got to keep your ear to the ground, and one thing that, like, in spite of all the bad the bad things that are happening now, and the way that things are trending in the wrong direction in general, we have the internet, so everybody can get on there and find out things, and you can talk to people even that live in those parts of the world. Like, you can gather information. You can use translator algorithms on these foreign boards if you don't understand the language. So we have access to information like no generation ever has before. So there's really no reason to just take your stories from the official outlets, the establishment. Like, the purpose of the establishment is not to inform you, it's to tell you, it's to push a particular view, it's to tell you what they want you to think. So everybody has to go and find out for themselves.
yeah, and the other thing is that what the Eritreans want to do, but also the Ethiopian prime minister, I should say, is really wiped, or some people in the military anyway. They want to wipe this culture off of the map because they're angry that there is this old kingdom and there's this old history of the Tigray region, and they're jealous of it. They want to erase this from the map. This whole any kind of anything that reminds them of this rich history of the Aksumite Empire. Like, they're destroying all kinds of um, uh, anything that reminds them of that time, including some of these like old I forgot what they're called now. They're like these really old clay tablets that are thousands of years old, and they've destroyed some of those as well that would hold decrees. They're from before the region became Christian. But they're like, because they're really old roots in that region, and they want to wipe it off the map. And by the way, I just looked up how many people died, how many civilians died in the Russian war so far, Ukraine war. It's 6,430 estimated. And if you juxtapose that to maybe as many as 600,000 people in the Tigray region, and then if you also look at the type of war crimes that are being committed, like civilians starving to death, literally starving to death. Like, you have people starving sometimes. It's like, oh, they don't eat for a day, but starving to death, that's on the next level. That's like where you don't eat for a couple weeks. That's
Yeah.
really gruesome. And then they have like rapes of children, rapes of elderly women, and just point blank executions of entire villages. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to use this one, and I appreciate everybody's time. If there's anything else, maybe we got some people listening from Ethiopia, Eritrea. Somebody that knows more about this, let us know in the comments. But I think if there's no other comments from you guys, I think I want to close this one off.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I appreciate you for bringing this to my attention. letting the
Right.
audience know also. Yeah, Ethiopia is an interesting culture. It's very, very old. I mean, it's definitely a multi-ethnic state, different languages and people groups, but it is a very old civilizational hearth. And it's a shame, you know, whenever somebody destroys history, like it doesn't have to be your history, but whenever, like, because I don't have any ancestry from that part of the world, but when history is destroyed, it makes all of us poorer and worse off because it's knowledge that's being destroyed, and it's making the
Yeah.
world a more ignorant place. I find it atrocious, you know, and I
Yeah.
just, one of the things that really offends me is when people smash up historical sites and destroy records. You know, it's a very vile, uncouth thing to do, and it affects the whole world, whether people know it or not. It does, because then then if you want to go and find out what happened or study the past or find out why this group is set against that group, and you know, you can't because the records are gone. So, any rate,
Well,
that's all I want
I'd
to say.
like to add too that this is not I said earlier to Niels that our audience, you know, the good guys versus the bad guys. There's corruption on both sides, and U.S. is still trying to figure out who's doing what. I mean, each side is obviously accusing the other party of fraud and illegitimacy and crimes. So I want to make it very clear to the audience here. There seems to be corruption on both sides here at the top. So
Yeah.
and these are the bystanders, innocent bystanders. Ethiopia, the nation of Ethiopia, most of the people of Ethiopia, they're good people. They're the ones that they are victim of the high concentration of corruption at the very tops of these two government entities.
Yeah, the
So,
TPLF certainly doesn't look like it's the good guys either. So
no,
because they're
no,
also rooted in Marxist Leninist,
yes,
but it's the ordinary Christians and the ordinary people that end up dying, unfortunately.
yes,
So, yeah,
right, right,
yeah.
exactly.
So let's hope that they find a solution for that. Let's pray for that, actually, and I think that's a good thing. You know, we pray in our church for Ukraine for a solution to that war.
Hmm.
Let's also, I think, if we get a chance, pray for these people and help them. Because I remember, you know, I'm an '80s kid. Back in the '80s in the Netherlands, there
Yes.
was a big There was a big drought in Ethiopia, and we would all like gather food and stuff for the Ethiopian people. So back then it was on the radar, and for some
Mhm.
reason now it's no longer. And you know, these are Christian brothers, and these are, you know, human souls, and we should be praying for them and praying for an end to this conflict. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway. Yeah. All right.
Thank you, Neil, so much for sharing this topic. And like I said, it once again goes to show you that oftentimes in war, we always want to hear who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. But really, in this case, you finally see that there's really no good products. I mean, we hate war in general. And yes, there is a lot of times a good guy and bad guy, but in this case, and in a lot of times, it's just corruption on both sides, and the people have nothing to do with this madness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even in the Ukraine war, like, you know, it's like, oh, we make the Russians out to be the bad guys, but you know, in the end, like the Russians that are conscripted or that are working, you know, for the in the army, they're also just guys, you know, and many of them are also believers, and they're just doing what, you know, what they're told, and you know, they might believe that they're fighting for their country. And you know, in the end, it's a tragedy for everybody. War is, because you know, it's the common people that end up yeah, feeling the brunt
Oh
of it.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, all right. Well, with that, I want to close it off, and see you guys in the next episode. All right.
Thank you. Awesome.